So Conflicted Theatre started making work back in 2010 with our first show After Jekyll, and then we followed up the next year with The Red Shoes.
Conflicted theatre shows have a kind of a particular feeling about them that I can't quite put my finger on, but that runs through every show. So even though each of their shows is unique and completely different from their other shows, there's always this feeling that runs through the show that you always know you're at a Conflicted show.
I don't think we have a way of working that's set, perhaps because we're still developing and perhaps because that's how it should be. It should be evolving and not static.
Conflicted for me is something I've come to learn as more of an experience for an audience than, something just presented to an audience sitting in the dark behind a fourth wall feeling safe.
The style and identity, I think, of the company really started to emerge with our next show, 18 to 35. It was an original, site-responsive and immersive promenade piece. We didn't actually know it was all these things at the time. We were just making the show that we thought would be the most exciting and adventurous.
It was kind of like a mind map in a way. We had all these memories which the character was accessing, but we staged it physically, so the character walked from one memory to the other.
We kept the audience to 12 because we wanted them to literally walk in the footsteps of Joe.
I don't know what it is, but I do know that from working with Conflicted that they have a very particular focus on the audience experience.
The basis that we were drawing from seemed titanic and it seemed huge, but they were things that happened. Like there was a 40-foot tunnel just built, and there was things like that I never thought that could happen, and I find that rewarding. I find that without setting yourself limits, and very possibly very often on a small budget, you can produce something magical.
Some scenes were generated purely from what the individual rooms offered us. So we then tried to get these scenes to fit into our narrative, and then we had a narrative and we tried to fit these scenes into specific spaces, and we ended up adapting space to narrative and narrative to space, so there was a real dialogue between architecture and story.
By presuming your audience have the capacity to imagine something with you, you can produce something on a huge scale, and you can impress people, and you can show people that there is a different way to enjoy a theatrical experience.
With the Scarlet Letter, we wanted to reach a much bigger audience, and so we searched for the right space to put our show on, and in the end we secured Millennium Hall within City Hall.
Look, I liked our subtle design in the off-site location, which I thought was really strong, and the audience as part of the architecture of the play I thought was interesting as well.
We wanted to create an entire micro-society within the space. So the first task we asked the audience to do was to build the school, the factory, the church, the government buildings, and then to inhabit them. They weren't asked to do anything after that, but the action took place in and around them, and so they were implicated in all the action thereafter. I think even more so than in 18 to 35.
The only way I can maybe kind of explain it, or the only thing I can compare it to, is the difference between handing an audience a beautifully painted picture as opposed to handing someone a ball of mala.
It was really important that we created the world of the show rather than just plonking it into a space that already existed. So we had 7 performers, 2 light musicians, our biggest ever tech and design team, and then we had to breathe life into a life-size puppet of a 7-year-old girl.
Bunraku was the puppetry style we were looking at. So I think she was kind of half a Bunraku puppet and half a marionette really, but she was operated by 3 actors, and actually she was, without saying she was one of my favourite parts of the show, I think she was a big success for people. People really loved her, and she was a bit of colour and a bit of light.
Pearl is one of our proudest achievements. In the novel we adapted from The Scarlet Letter, she's regularly described as a pixie or a demon, and she really does seem to own these supernatural qualities, and so we felt to manifest her for the stage that she needed to be more than human. the idea for We Make Gods was sparked by a line from a Hermann Hesse novel, Damien. The line being, we make gods and do battle with them and then they bless us. And that has a beautiful narrative arc in and of itself, but I also think it's very true.
Gods, old and new, of many cultures, seem to have a design about them. They have a purpose, or a good or a bad, or they have a power, and I think the questions relating to what happens if we make our own, what will we imbue them with?
How we're interpreting the gods is not necessarily in an organised religious sense, although those gods exist in this world too. But I suppose it's the new gods that we're creating in a more secular society without religion. So without religion, what gives our life meaning and purpose? You know, is it family? Is it career? Is it our exercise regimes, BMWs, organic diets? Is it love? You know, what is it that we use to fill the void? Or maybe more appropriately, the abyss.
It's a really solid base concept, and at the same time it's wide open to interpretation. So every meeting we've had so far, everybody has it's kind of sparked fresh new ideas with everybody, and everybody has a unique take on it. So I think it's going to make for really, really rich devising material.
We Make Gods is something that I find very easy to engage with, because I don't think it's something that is unfamiliar to anyone who's going to watch it. I think it's something that is going to make people identify something within themselves.
So there never has been a female hero in the Grecian sense. For example, no women were asked to accompany Jason on the Argo or to accompany Odysseus on his Odyssey. And a lot of this is down to what the role of women used to be perceived as.
The rites of passages are just different all around the world for different women, and it would be interesting to see what are the equivalents. What is the equivalent of the ancient rites of passage now, these days?
But the role of women has drastically changed since then, obviously. So it's the idea of an Odyssey with a female hero is really rich ground for investigation.
As a real female in this day and age, what obstacles and what monsters do I face, on a daily basis or on a lifetime basis?
Joss Whedon gave a really interesting talk recently where he was talking about the fact that he's constantly asked, why do you write strong female characters? And his answer ultimately was, because you're still asking me that question.
So for this show, we're really trying to flex and develop our devising muscles. We're getting 3 performers, a musician, a lighting designer and our set and costume designer in from day one to help us create new and exciting ways of telling a story. So through response to the architecture, through colour and light, through sound and movement. And then when you bring an element like text into that palette of languages, it seems like a really exciting element to bring rather than a given, or maybe to have text as the bedrock to put all these other elements on top of. What we're proposing is a much more horizontal way of making theatre so that all the elements are equal. That's why we want to devise.
Because at the end of the day, traditional theatre is only one part of the palette to dip into. And I think Convicted have always strived to have more mediums through which to communicate the story we're trying to tell. I'm big, I'm sorry, it's yours.
For me, it's important.
For you?
For me.
Choose. You're not helping.